And Putin has already openly threatened Armenia with the Ukrainian scenario because of its attempts to move closer to the European Union. The Kremlin leader drew parallels with the start of aggression against Ukraine, stating that the so-called crisis once began precisely with Kyiv's aspirations for European integration. In addition, Putin issued yet another threat directed at the Baltic countries. Responding to the statement by Lithuania's foreign minister about NATO's ability to eliminate the occupiers' military bases in Kaliningrad in the event of a conflict, Putin promised to raze to the ground anyone who tries to do so. Let us recall that relations between Moscow and Yerevan are currently in deep crisis, particularly due to Armenia's suspension of its participation in the CSTO. We are joined by Oleg Lisnyy, political scientist. Mr. Oleg, we are glad to welcome you.
Likewise, good morning.
A very good morning. Well, let's begin, I suggest. Let's start today with yet another statement from Vladimir Putin, this time regarding the situation in Armenia. And as a number of political commentators have already noted, well, at least in some places, he has finally started telling the actual truth. It wasn't any 8 years of bombing Donbass, but simply Ukraine's European aspirations that were the real reasons that provoked such a reaction from Russia. And now supposedly Armenia should get ready as well. What do you think about this development?
Well, the actual truth coming from Vladimir Putin, it seems to emerge only every once in a while, and sometimes he even contradicts himself because not so long ago, both he and his various lackeys on state-run media channels were saying that they had no real objections against the idea of Ukraine joining the EU. It is primarily the expansion of NATO that triggers them, and every other internal matter is strictly Ukraine's business, as Putin likes to say. So it is not surprising that he reacts this way to Armenia, since for Russia it is very dangerous that its possessions, as it sees them, are gradually drifting away in different directions. And Armenia is certainly no exception to this rule. In other words, Armenia sees that moving away from Moscow is the best choice. I recently had the distinct honor and the great privilege of speaking with several of my Armenian colleagues during a very productive roundtable discussion, and they shared something that, in my personal opinion, is incredibly important. They said that as long as Ukraine stands strong and as long as it continues fighting against the aggression of the Russian Federation, many nations, very much including Armenia, have a real historic chance to finally break away from Russian influence and follow their own unique and specific path. In other words, the nation of Armenia now has this significant opportunity precisely because of the fact that the resistance of Ukraine has so seriously weakened the overall power of the Russian Federation. Of course, during the elections in Armenia, all the various technologies that the Russian Federation has utilized in every single country where elections have taken place are now being actively applied. Sorry for the tautology. To be more precise, this includes tactics of psychological intimidation, as well as a sophisticated and aggressive information warfare campaign conducted by the Russians, both their specialized services and the so-called useful idiots who are present in every country, who still mistakenly believe that the Russian world can exist without its fangs, and only in a traditional kokoshnik headpiece, yes. We also see the absolute state of hysteria and frenzy that is currently happening on Russian television. Just look at Simonian, who can only consider herself Armenian by her last name, but in reality, she is a completely devoted and loyal servant of Comrade Putin, yes. Over there, they are reaching some unbelievable levels of utter nonsense, excuse my language, in their characterizations and descriptions of Nikol Pashinyan. Well, in fact, they are using a completely different approach. Dehumanization, yes. That's why I really hope and I rely on the current sociological data that Pashinyan will manage to emerge victorious in these upcoming elections, and that he will actually go beyond simply making basic public declarations when it comes to cooperating with the civilized world. This is all the more true, since he currently enjoys the support of both Donald Trump and European leaders. Of course, he did not actually promise full EU membership in his campaign pledges. The most he promised was that within a certain period, Armenia would finally have visa-free travel with European countries. But even so, he now has a genuine chance to break away from Moscow's influence. And that is precisely why Putin is absolutely furious.
Mr. Oleg, in this specific regard, I would like to clarify or gain your expert perspective and insight on the prospects of the entire Russian sphere of geopolitical influence. I mean those various countries that originally came into existence as a direct result of the collapse of the Soviet Union.
The prospects are murky, as the classic once said, and a lot of this depends on our success. When we win this war, and I am confident that we will, well, even now, many of the former republics, the leaders of the former republics, as one of our presidents used to say, are looking in many directions. Yes, looking at China, looking at Europe, everyone is looking somewhere. But they are moving further away from Moscow, and they are no longer afraid of it. We see that even though he is greeted there with flowers, with motorcades and all the rest, but when you look at the end result, it's just not like it used to be in the past. Look, on May 9th, for example, he was essentially and practically begging the leaders of certain countries to come. Just imagine for a second, before, at the mere wave of Comrade Putin's hand, they would fly over, jumping out of their pants, but now it's like, well, we're not sure, we're still thinking about it until the last moment. And many didn't come at all. These are very serious indicators for Putin. He's not stupid, he can see this. But to even allow the very thought that he is no longer the Tsar, it is something he simply cannot bring himself to do. And that's why he's so fixated on Ukraine, because for any Russian Tsar, Ukraine is the foundation of the empire, right? And that's why the success of many countries depends on our success. Because Kazakhstan should also be on guard if, God forbid, Russia remains strong. There where, well, any republic is by default considered by Putin to be his underbelly or something like that, right? So they should be rooting for us and, in fact, not allow Putin to circumvent the sanctions. But everyone is making money however they want.
Mr. Ole, I actually was very interested in seeking your professional opinion about Kazakhstan because, on the one hand, we see the behavior of the general Kazakh population when, sensitive issues are raised there, particularly regarding the Russians. And on the other hand, we see these periodic, highly respectful and notably complimentary public statements coming from Mr. Tokayev. What is the best way for us to explain this apparent contradiction?
Explain, there is a mysterious Russian soul, and here there is a subtle approach to diplomacy. Well, look, he actually says the same thing with certain remarks to all the leaders of this world. Well, those who are, yes. In other words, he communicates with a great deal of tact and politeness. Yet beneath that surface, only he truly knows what is happening inside his own mind. And this lack of transparency is certainly not a positive development for the future of Russia. Because he understands perfectly well that, again, the element of the Russian-speaking population is always, yes, always a big problem. All the more so because we know about the Kazakh tragedy, how everything Kazakh was wiped out there. And this cannot be forgotten. And I think that Tokayev is simply, playing a great role. That is, once again, it's multi-vector policy, and he's simply waiting for the moment I mentioned earlier. When Putin weakens, when Russia becomes toothless, well, then they'll say goodbye to it. And now, well, yes, that's just how it's customary to greet.
Mr. Ole, we actually still have up to 4 minutes left in our discussion. Regarding Russia's teeth, or what exactly is left of them, there is significant information suggesting that NATO should act much more decisively and substantially increase the pressure on Russia. Today we are discussing the serious incident involving a drone that struck a residential apartment building in Romania. This has led to the emergency convening of an urgent diplomatic meeting only a few days after the incident. Given the gravity of this situation, do you believe that this specific escalation could become a definitive point of no return for the region's security, or has it already been crossed? And why, then, is there still no absolutely tough response?
Well, it's only a matter of time before the tragedy becomes larger in terms of casualties. I do not want to jinx it, but that is where things are heading right now. Because when evil goes unpunished even a single time, it does not just become significantly bolder, it simply crosses all possible boundaries of morality, tolerance, and anything else. That's why the reaction, since we were talking about teeth earlier, right now it really resembles a toothless response. In other words, NATO shouldn't be herbivorous, as I always say, because herbivores always attract some kind of predators. And here the predator is especially insidious in the form of the Russian Federation. All the more so we can't guarantee. There are different versions, like it veered off course, was it shot down or not. The fact remains, there is a Russian drone and there is a specific target that was attacked by it. Why? Because there is a war going on. Simply because of the fact that someone does not wish to see the war in Europe doesn't mean the war will not inevitably come to them. It has already arrived within Poland and taken the lives of people there. It has come there, and drones have flown into Moldova and into Romania more than once. Therefore, from my own personal perspective, the step that Ukraine proposed a long time ago is both highly objective and strategically beneficial. This is for the neighboring countries that share a border with us to effectively close off a significant portion of the sky over certain regions so that absolutely nothing is able to get through the defenses. Because, for example, this toothless explanation from the military, I think our military simply laughed at what the Romanians were saying, that they had enough time, 4 minutes there and so on. We didn't know where to shoot it down, and then it went there, and we went here, and then morally we weren't ready to do it yet. Well, it is really just a matter of time when there will be more and when there will be less time. So if you want to have more time, let us listen closely to what Ukraine is saying so that we can know for sure that this specific part of the border is fully covered by air defense and that this is definitely not an attack on the Russian Federation. Well, I have never actually seen any Russian Ivan actually sitting inside a drone and flying it somewhere. Well, for now, they certainly do not put anyone in there. Maybe they will later. That's why toothlessness always leads to tragedy. And this is just a matter of time. You know, the silent clock of tragedy has already started its ticking. The only remaining question is this. In exactly which country will it happen? I am talking about a NATO member country. And if you don't fully realize this, for example, if Estonia says, you really should be much more careful about shooting down those UAVs because it makes us very uncomfortable and it could eventually lead to a conflict. No, ladies and gentlemen, that is simply not how it works at all. There is a war going on and various incidents do happen. Make sure this doesn't happen. And you can help Ukraine even more, and that will actually be beneficial for those countries first and foremost, because we are already at war and they are not yet.
Just like the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine is doing. There is an update now, friends. Let me share it with you. Mr. Oleg, thank you very much for your comments. Oleg Lisnyy, political scientist.